This video will describe production of some miniature Dizzy Bowl projects. In two previous videos I described the cutting of some thin and ultra-thin laminate strips on the Accu-Slice system. And in a subsequent video showed gluing these strips up to make some laminate boards. So for this project we're starting off with some of those thin strips cut in that previous video. They vary in thickness between 10 thousandths and 45 thousandths inch thick. About 100 pieces of wood will be glued up to make a laminate board, such as this. And then from this board I'll cut out round discs, such as this. And then I'll take these discs and slice them again on the Accu-Slice system to make these thin laminate discs. And then these will be glued up, rotated each one, in this case 4 degrees, to get my Dizzy Bowl projects. In the previous videos I described cutting and gluing these up, so I won't repeat that part of the process. So we'll start right in with cutting the discs, sanding them flush, making my discs, gluing them up, and then cutting the thin disc and rotating them to glue up for the projects. I'm looking to make 2 projects in this video. I think I have enough material here to make 2 bowls. I'll be making a Dizzy Bowl and I'll probably be making a Dizzy Egg. I did some initial tests to determine the angle of rotation of these thin discs. Each of these discs would be 75 thousandths of an inch thick. And I did a test and it looks like about a 4-degree rotation for each of these discs will give me a nice pattern. So I'll be gluing these up, 4 degrees rotation for each disc. So let's start right in with cutting the disc and getting ready to glue them up. Okay, I'm ready to start cutting out my disc on the scroll saw. And I did cut the board shorter so it's much easier to manipulate on the scroll saw. So I got 3 discs here I'll be cutting out. And the blade I'm using is a 9.5 teeth per inch fairly coarse blade. I'm cutting just outside of the scribed circle line. Subsequently, I will sand each laminated disc down to the scribed line. Because I was such rough cutting, I didn't cut right to the line. I left quite a bit of space on the line, so I'll be sanding it on my edge sander down to the line to get it smooth. So my disc had been sanded circular to just match the line that I drew on these when I was sanding them after they were cut on the scroll saw. Each of these discs contains 99 pieces of wood. And rather than use double-sided tape to attach this to the MDF, I'm actually going to glue it with Type-on-2 glue for 2 reasons. The first reason, I want to cut all the way down to the very end. I don't want to take a chance of cutting into the tape and gumming up my blade. And secondly, the glue will hold much better than double-sided tape. I don't want to take a chance of one of these popping off and losing a board. It's too much work in producing these. So I'll be using Type-on-2 glue to glue these to a piece of MDF. In this case, I'll be probably putting 3 of my discs. I cut 3 at a time on the system. So now we're ready to start gluing these up. So I'll clamp those so they're all exactly the same height and let those dry for about 2 hours before I cut them on the Accu-Slice system. Okay, I'm ready to cut my first set of 3 discs, and my first cut of course is just to square off the boards. After I cut off my squaring off piece, I'll be turning my indexing knob 1 turn for the blade and then 1.5 turns to give me 75 thousandths, and I'll keep repeating that for every disc. And I should get 12 discs out of this one solid disc. In this first cut to square off the ends of each disc, I'm only slicing off about 20 thousandths of an inch off each of the discs. After rotating the index wheel 2.5 turns, I'll then cut my first set of laminated discs. I continued turning the index wheel 2.5 turns, and then sliced each subsequent set of discs. I was able to slice 13 75 thousandths inch thick discs from each of the laminated disc sets. I was actually able to squeeze 13 discs out of each of those. Last one might be a little bit close, but might be usable. So it's 13 times 3, what's that, 39 discs. So let me finish up with the rest. This is another tool I use, usually to get rid of the small burr, where it kicks out the bandsaw at the end. You get a little bit of a burr, and you can see the burr there. And a few saw marks, especially in this end piece. These inner pieces aren't as bad, but that end piece you get some saw marks on. But that'll clean up the saw marks too and get rid of the burrs. So I usually run this through this sand flea just to get rid of that. A single pass over each side of the disc is enough to clean the disc up and remove the burrs. All my thin discs are cut, ready for glue up, and I've estimated that my angle of rotation will be 4 degrees. And so I made up my jigs. These are the same jigs I've made previously in previous videos, that my disc will sit in here, and then I'll clamp them to get them aligned. And I'm using Type on 2 glue for the glue up. The disc fits snugly against the 4 pins in the glue up jig. This prevents slipping and sliding of the disc when they are glued. After glue is applied to the subsequent disc, they are positioned on top of the previous disc and rotated to the required rotation angle. After setting the rotation angle of the disc, I apply light finger pressure to set the disc and then add the next disc. I am gluing up sets of 6 or 7 of the laminated disc at a time, and I'll be clamping these in the clamping jig. Later, 2 of these sets of 6 and 7 discs are glued together to produce 13 layered disc sets. These disc sets will then be used for both the miniature dizzy eggs and the miniature double dizzy bolt. I'm gluing up the sections of glue disc to make my a dizzy egg. So I have about 13 layers already glued on. I'm adding another 13 layers. And what I did here, I set alignment marks. So these are the lines that I'll line up so my patterns match up exactly. These preset alignment marks make it much easier to align the disc after glue is applied to the disc sets. It's just much easier to see the alignment positions. And I check the alignment position on both sides of the disc. The glue disc sets are allowed to dry for at least 30 minutes before the subsequent disc layers are added. And some more layers. A total of 50 disc layers are glued together to produce this dizzy egg, which will be 4 inches tall when completed. Each layer is 75 thousandths inch thick, and each layer contains 99 strips of wood. In addition, I added a top and bottom segmented walnut ring to the egg. Each segmented disc is composed of 24 segments, which meet precisely in the center. I allow the final glue disc to dry and set at least 4 hours before I start turning. The Glue-up's complete and I'm ready to start turning. I do have a rotating tail stock in here just to give me some additional support as this is being cut down. So it's going to become an egg about 4 inches long, about 3 inches in diameter. And so I'm going to start turning. I initially turn the glued disc assembly around to check the pattern of the layers. Then I proceed to shape the egg. I do not use a pattern for the egg shape, I just shape it freehand. After shaping the top of the egg, it is sanded starting with 100 grit sandpaper down to 400 grit sandpaper. Now that egg's about half done. So let me reverse the egg, put the vacuum chuck on, and I'll do the other side. I've taken my egg off the headstock and mounted on my rotating tail stock. And I added my vacuum chuck. And so now we're ready to turn off the bottom. The bottom of the egg is again sanded as was done for the top of the egg, starting with 100 grit sandpaper and going down to 400 grit. The egg is complete, so I turn off the air compressor pump to release it from the vacuum chuck. This is a completed egg after a coat of bush oil. The egg is 4 inches tall, contains 50 disc layers, each layer with 99 strips of wood. This equates to about 9,000 wood surface exposures in this 4-inch tall egg. I'm making the base for this miniature dizzy vase, and I'm making out of some walnut segmented ring. There's 24 segments per ring here, and I want a piece about between a 1/2 and 3/4 inch thick. So first of all, let me square it off. And I'm using my quick change to hold my blade in place. Rather than glue it, I'm just using this quick change clamp. I first slice off about 20 thousandths from the face of the segmented disc. I then rotate the index wheel 1 full turn for the blade kerf, and then 10 full turns again to give me a 1/2 inch thick disc. So there's my base ring. It's about a 1/2 inch thickness, and you saw a little bit of smoke there. Question often comes, how do you know when your blade's dull? And on light grained wood, you'll start seeing burnish marks, or darkening of the wood. Or if you start seeing smoking of the blade, it means the blade's dull. It's time to change the blade. So this blade is shot ready to be changed. I glued up the laminated sets of disc on a lathe in the same manner as was done for the miniature dizzy egg. I have all my pieces glued up from my double mini bowl vase. And there's 68 layers, each of these 0.075 inches thick, and each of these layers contains 99 pieces of wood. So it's almost 7,000 pieces of wood in there. And with exposure both sides, I mean like almost 14,000 exposures to the surface. And on the top and bottom I have a 24 segment walnut disc. And I have my pattern all laid out here, so this is my pattern for my double dizzy bowl. My first thing, I'm just going to smooth it off to see the pattern, and then we'll start shaping it. I prefer to use a round carbide lathe chisel for turning these laminated bowls. There's a lot of epoxy in the joints between the layers, and the carbide cutters not only cut well, but seem to last longer than other tools. After turning the assembly round, I start to shape the bowl by cutting into the neck down sections of the bowl. I continue to shape the bowl both inside and outside, and then sand it starting with 100 grit sandpaper down to 400 grit. This is the finished bowl in the lathe after a final sanding with 4/0 steel wool. I'll then cut it off the headstock from the lathe and give it a coat of bush oil, followed by several coats of polyurethane finish. After several coats of polyurethane finish, this is the resulting miniature double dizzy bowl. The bowl stands 6 inches tall. It is comprised of 68 laminated layers, each layer containing 99 pieces of wood that vary in thickness from as thin as 10,000ths of an inch up to 40,000ths of an inch thick. That equates to over 6,700 pieces of wood, and with a double side exposure of the boards, that is over 13,000 wood exposures in this bowl. The top and bottom layers are 24 segment walnut rings, each about a ½ inch thick. This is a comparison of my 3 double dizzy bowls made to date. The large double dizzy bowl is 24 inches tall, contains 230 laminated discs, each layer with 149 wood strips, which equates to about 60,000 wood exposures. The second double dizzy bowl is 13 inches tall and contains 115 laminate layers, each layer containing 130 wood strips, and this equates to about 30,000 wood exposures in this double dizzy bowl. In comparison, the smallest double dizzy bowl is only 6 inches tall, and it contains about 13,000 wood exposures. This completes this video on the production of these miniature dizzy bowl and egg projects. Be sure to visit our 2 other videos relating to this project. The first video describing the slicing of the thin wood strips with the Accu-Slice system, and the second video describing the production of the laminated boards. If you have additional questions, please drop me an email or visit our website for additional information.